Then we shall go on to our next speaker, my co-moderator, Dr. Mudit Tyagi, who is going to talk on masquerades and mimics and anterior uveitis. On to you, doctor.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Chitra, and for giving me this opportunity to talk about masquerades. I think a lot of my points have already been covered by Prabjot in some of our brilliant slides, but I'll just dwell upon some of them again. Now, what are masquerades in uveitis? Uveitic masquerade syndromes essentially are a group of disorder that present as intraocular inflammatory process, but are in fact either non-inflammatory or the inflammation may be secondary to some underlying different cause. And we should be cognizant of them and aware of them so as to not fall into a trap of diagnosing something which may be more sinister as something else over here. So this is a slide which is courtesy my friend Dr. Anamika. I think some of the points have already been even mentioned by Prabjot. But whenever we see a brown colored hypopion, why do we see them in the first place? The reason is that there's a necrotic iris and dispersed manilin granules, and these can be a clue to an underlying melanoma or tuberculosis, like what Dr. JB and Dr. Ratnam had said, or even a listeria. I will also show you two more cases. So this was one patient who came to us, he's a known diabetic, and he came with a sudden decrease in vision. And if you look at the right eye, you see this entire area filled with a blood-stained coagulum and a blood-stained hypopion inferiorly. And when we took a tap of this patient, what we found was presence of myeloblasts, metamyelocytes, and promyelocytes. So a point to remember is a recalcitrant or a blood-stained hypopion should alert us to the presence of a masquerade or an underlying blood dyscrasia. And a peripheral smear becomes a very valuable investigation in these cases. Similarly, this is another point I'm just reiterating, probably what Prabjot had already shared. Presence of a hypopion in a case of leukemia should alert us to either an underlying blast crisis or also sometimes the presence of a CNS spread and a leptomeningeal involvement. So through the pile arteries and then anterior ciliary vessels, some of these tumor cells can come into the AC. So presence of a hypopion in leukemic cases can also be a clue to an underlying leptomeningeal involvement in these cases. Another point to remember is a drug-induced uveitis. So I'll show you two more cases. This was a patient who came to us with a dense fibrinous reaction in both eyes, DM4 circumciliary congestion, and a shallow AC with a stromal edema. This lady was diagnosed as a case of acute angle closure and was started on anti-glaucoma medication and had been also advised for a YAG PI. But a B scan revealed the presence of choroidal detachments in both the eyes. And when we took a history, this patient told us that she has been taking topiramate for the last 15 days. And so topiramate is known to cause a uveitis with choroidal effusion. And the treatment for this essentially involves stopping topiramate, which is the incriminating drug in these cases. So we stopped topiramate, started the patient on topical steroids and cycloplegics. And within just 3 days, look at the inflammation starts regressing. Now the AC details are visible. The membrane has started regressing. Vision has improved to 20/60 and 2200 in the right eye and the left eye respectively. The corneal edema also regresses and the choroidals also start regressing over a period of time. This was a UBM of the patient, again showing some peripheral CDs over here. At 1 week, the vision had improved to 20/50 in the right eye and 23/20 in the left eye. And there is most of the inflammation has regressed in this case. Again, CDs have regressed. This was our second case, again with a similar history. Patient presented with a bilateral hypopion uveitis, was diagnosed elsewhere as an angle closure glaucoma. Somebody had even initially attempted doing a surgical PI, and when it did not improve, they referred the patient over here. And a history revealed the presence of using topiramate. So whenever you see a patient with bilateral uveal effusion, a sudden myopic shift in a hypopion, please keep in mind a possibility of a drug-induced reaction, and topiramate is notorious for it. But apart from that, chlorthalidone, hydrochlorothiazide, trimethoprim, sulfamethoxazole, and even acetazolamide is known to occasionally cause it. These cases respond very well to withdrawing the drug and to use of topical steroids and cycloplegics. So like I was mentioning, this was one patient who had initially been thought of having angle closure glaucoma. Somebody tried doing a cataract extraction to disastrous consequences, and this was nothing but a case of chlorthalidone-induced inflammation. All we needed to do was stop the incriminating drug and give topical steroids, and we would not have fallen into the trap of trying to attempt a cataract surgery in these eyes. So we ultimately had to go ahead, do a membranectomy, remove all those membranes and put oil inside the eye. And this is how the patient ultimately responded to. But all of this could have been avoided if a careful drug history would have been elicited. So the point to remember is that there are a lot of drugs which can cause these sort of reactions. And whenever you see these atypical hypopions, it is important to take a pause, stop, and ask what is the drug history which a patient is taking. So like what already Prabjot had said, hypopyon uveitis in a patient on treatment for tuberculosis, suspect rifabutin usage. So a patient on treatment for TB with rifabutin, remember that it's a dose-dependent effect of rifabutin at dosage of over 300 milligrams. The condition may be asymmetrical, and sometimes the hypopyon resolves on cessation of rifabutin usage. So there's a huge gamut of drugs which are known to cause anti uveitis. More common among them are rifabutin, bisphosphonates, sulfonamides, apart from what I've already mentioned. And it is important for us as clinicians to be aware of this, or at least keep this possibility in mind when we see these atypical hypopyons. So my last points before I stop are atypical hypopyons. Remember, recalcitrant blood-stained hypopyons can be an indicator of a masquerade or a blood dyscrasia. Bilateral hypopyon and choroidal detachments, think of a drug-induced reaction. And hypopyon on a patient with treatment for tuberculosis, think of rifabutin. Leukemia patients, remember, it can be a clue to an impending blast crisis or a CNS spread. Thank you.
So Dr. Biswas, any questions for Dr. Mudit? Or anyone else in the panel?
Sir, you are muted.
Beautiful presentation, Mudit.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just very impressive.
Hypopyon. If you say bilateral hypopyon, then you think about a kind of underlying malignancy. We have reported a chronic myeloid leukemia presenting as bilateral hypopyon in an elderly person. Another important thing is that biphosphonate can produce posterior scleritis also. That drug-induced scleritis, posterior scleritis has been described in biphosphonate. History of usage of the drug is quite important, but at the same time, we need to take a very good history of other conditions also. Think about a kind of underlying malignancy. We have reported chronic myeloid leukemia present.
Anything else? Probably, I don't know how common syphilis is. Even treatment for syphilis can present as a anterior uveitis, I think.
Treatment for syphilis, usually, occasionally you may see a gerish eczema sort of a reaction, and that may be the one. But usually they, over a period of 5 to 6 days or a week, regress back just with the use of penicillin. But you need to be still aware of that fact, that if there's a patient who is a syphilis, known case of syphilis, you started them on treatment with penicillin, you may occasionally see a gerish eczema sort of a reaction and an anterior uveitis. But it is nothing to be alarmed about. This regresses by itself over a period of time. You don't have to reinstate systemic steroid or something. Yeah, Dr. Vishali is saying something.
It's always a sign that your treatment is working, and you just add some steroid.
Yeah.
Reaction.
Yes.
Anything else? Any of the other panelists have to ask before we go on to our next speaker?
Please go on.
You see, retinoblastoma is a diffuse infiltrating retinoblastoma which produces hypopyon. And if you do an UBM, you can find out that in the ciliary body or in the pars-plana region tumor cells.
Yeah, that point was like both had brilliantly shown those slides of very nice slides of retinoblastoma and hypopyon characterization.
Hypopyon in children and in elderly population should not be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And masquerades need to be ruled out the first possibility.
If I have a point, Dr. Chitra, just to re-emphasize on the drug-induced uveitis, which Mudit has mentioned, though it is seldom seen, but when we come across, and if if you diagnose it appropriately, then it saves a lot of things for the patients. Now, I would like to ask probably Dr. JB and Dr. Vaishali, and so what is that drug which you commonly come across in your clinical practice currently for drug-induced uveitis? Or do you have one? Or because we see about topiramate is one of the commonest causes we see for drug-induced uveitis.
Earlier, in the HIV days, I used to see rifabutin-induced hypopyon uveitis. Nowadays, we don't see that.
Definitely. I too see quite a lot of anterior uveitis, and all my HLA-B27, already existing HLA-B27 patients, they are pouring in. Every day, I have at least 5 or 6 anterior uveitis. Before vaccination also, whoever had the COVID time, this 1 year, I have so many anterior uveitis. So many HLA-B27. So I think the COVID disease has something to do with the HLA typing. because some patients die, some patients don't die, as they get a very mild disease. So maybe if we do HLA typing in all these COVID patients, we can have some marker. Yeah.
I would just like to add what Avinash also said. We do see cases of Bremonidine associated uveitis, especially granulomatous nature. And this is quite common in people who are elderly. So I think we need to be very careful when we are using Bremonidine in these patients.
Thank you. Thank you for your input.